The human outpost on Kaler V was a collection of stark, geometric shapes against a landscape of soft, rolling purples and blues. The air was thick and carried the scent of damp earth and something sweet, like rotting fruit. To Hannah, it was a quiet world. Her colleagues, like Jean and Min, found the silence oppressive, but Hannah, a xenobiologist, preferred it. It made listening easier. Her current assignment was passive observation. The initial planetary survey had classified the dominant local predators, the xylos, as dangerous but uninteresting large territorial felinoids with 6 limbs and the cognitive capacity of a particularly stubborn housecat. The report advised caution and little else. Hannah was not so sure. She spent her days on the metal steps leading to the outpost's main door, a data slate in her hand, watching the treeline. The xylos were beautiful. They moved with a liquid grace, their spotted coats blending perfectly with the dappled light of the kaolin forest. They were social, she had noted, living in small family groups. But they were fiercely wary of the humans and their noisy machines on this particular afternoon. The suns were casting long, deep shadows. Hannah was reading a novel, an old digital copy of a book from Earth. It was a simple story about people and places far from this strange world. To her, it was a comfort. To an observer, it would have looked like she was in a trance, her body still, her eyes tracking back and forth across the screen, her finger occasionally swiping to bring a new page into existence. She was being observed. 3 xylos cubs had ventured to the very edge of the clearing. Their fur was still fluffy with youth, and their 6 legs seemed a little too big for their bodies. The largest, a bold male she would later think of as Baran, led the way. His sister, Sora, was just behind him, her large golden eyes taking in every detail. The smallest, Nari, brought up the rear, ready to bolt at the slightest sound. They had been watching the human for days. They saw it leave the metal den, sit on the hard steps, and become as still as a rock. It did not hunt. It did not play. It did not even sleep. It just held a flat, shiny thing and stared at it. This behavior was utterly alien. In their world, stillness usually meant one of 2 things: an ambush predator waiting to strike, or prey trying not to be seen. This creature was neither. It was simply still. Baran let out a low chitter, a sound of pure curiosity. Sora chittered back, a more cautious note in her voice. Nari just watched, her small body trembling with a mix of fear and fascination. Hannah felt their presence before she saw them. She had learned to sense the weight of a gaze. She did not look up immediately. Sudden movements scared them. She finished her paragraph, a slow, deliberate action, then slowly raised her head. Her eyes met Baran's across the clearing. The cub did not run. He stood his ground, though every muscle in his young body was tense. Sora took a half-step back. Nari vanished into the ferns with a soft rustle. Hannah knew this was a critical moment. The outpost's protocols demanded she stand up, make herself look bigger, and shoo them away. Class 2 predators, the manual said, do not engage. But Hannah was a reader of books and, she hoped, a reader of situations. She saw not Class 2 predators, but 3 curious children. So, she did nothing. She simply looked at Baran, then at Sora, and then she did something no other human on this planet had done for a xylos. She gave them a small, closed-lipped smile. It was a gentle, non-threatening expression. She held his gaze for a moment longer. Then, moving with the same slow care, she stood up. She did not look at them again. She turned, opened the heavy door to the outpost and slipped inside, leaving the cubs alone in the suddenly empty clearing. The moment the door sealed, the 2 cubs still in the open erupted into a frenzy of chitters and clicks. Baran puffed out his chest, proud that he had not fled. Sora was already trying to process what she had seen. The human's eyes were not the eyes of a hunter. They were calm, like the deep, still pools in the forest. And the thing it did with its mouth, what did that mean? From inside the outpost, Hannah leaned against the cool metal of the door, her heart beating a little faster. She had connected. It was a tiny thing, a shared glance, but it was more than anyone else had managed. Later that evening, her colleague Jean looked up from his own data slate in their shared common area. You were out there a long time. See anything interesting? Hannah thought of the 3 small faces, of the bold golden eyes that had held her own. Just the cubs? She said simply. Jean frowned. The predators? You should be more careful, Hannah. The report was very clear. They're not intelligent. They're just animals. Big, dangerous ones. They're curious, Hannah replied, her voice quiet. Curiosity in a predator usually ends with someone getting bitten, Jean said, going back to his work. Hannah didn't argue. She just picked up her own slate and began her official log entry for the day. She wrote about the weather, the routine sensor readings, and the continued absence of any significant seismic activity. She did not write about the 3 cubs or the silent exchange at the treeline. That was her own private data, something to be studied and understood before she shared it in the forest. Nestled in a warm den hidden between the roots of a massive, pulsating fungus, the cubs were equally preoccupied. Their mother, a large and powerful female named San, nuzzled them and licked their fur clean. She sensed their excitement. Baran was chittering non-stop, replaying his great stand against the strange, still creature. Sora was quieter, mimicking the human stillness, sitting with her back straight and staring at a blank patch of the den wall as if it held a great secret. Nari, who had finally crept back, listened with wide eyes. San listened to her cubs. She had seen the humans from a great distance. They were loud and their machines stank of lightning and burned things. They were dangerous, but her cubs were describing something different. A quiet creature. A creature that did not hunt. A creature that performed a strange, focused ritual with a flat stone. She did not understand, but she trusted the instincts of her young. Curiosity was the first teacher. She would let them watch. She would let them learn. But she would also watch, her own large, intelligent eyes narrowed, ready to protect them from any danger, no matter how quiet or still it seemed. The next day, Hannah returned to her steps. The air was fresh after a brief night rain. She sat down and activated her slate, but she wasn't really reading. She was waiting. She had a feeling, a researcher's hunch, that her observers would return. She was right. After only an hour, there was a rustle in the same patch of ferns. Baran emerged first, his head held high. Sora was right behind him. Even Nari was there, peeking out from behind her sister's legs. Hannah kept her eyes on her slate, pretending to be absorbed. She could see them in her peripheral vision, creeping closer than they ever had before. They stopped about 10 meters away, well out of reach but firmly in the open. Then, Baran did something extraordinary that he took a step forward, lowered his head, and dropped something from his mouth onto the permacrete in front of Hannah. It was a large, iridescent beetle-like insect, its carapace gleaming with a rainbow of colors. It was still alive, clicking its mandibles and trying to right itself. Then, Baran scrambled back to the safety of his sisters, and all three cubs stared at her, their heads cocked in unison. Waiting, Hannah looked from the struggling beetle to the cubs. Her mind, trained in observation and hypothesis, raced. This wasn't a gift of food. They weren't presenting it to her to eat. They had seen her reading her slate. They had seen her extract meaning from an inert object. They had brought her an object from their world, a fascinating, shiny, moving object, and they were waiting for her to perform her ritual. They were waiting for her to read the beetle. A slow, wondrous smile spread across Hannah's face. The manual was wrong. So wrong. She carefully did not touch the beetle. Instead, she pointed at it with one finger, then pointed at her own eyes. She then picked up her data slate, activated the sketching function, and began to draw the beetle. She worked slowly, deliberately, capturing the iridescent sheen of its shell, the number of its legs, the shape of its mandibles. She made written notes beside the sketch. Subject appears to be a hexapod insectoid. Carapace reflects light in a prismatic pattern, possibly a defensive mechanism. When she was finished, she turned the slate around and showed it to the cubs. On the screen was a perfect, colorful likeness of the beetle that was still clicking at their feet. The reaction was instantaneous. The cubs erupted into a chorus of excited chitters, their tails twitching, their bodies wriggling with delight. They looked from the real beetle to the drawing and back again. They had given her a thing, and she had performed her magic. She had trapped its essence on the shiny stone. They had communicated. Hannah gently nudged the beetle with the edge of her slate, encouraging it to move towards the grass. It righted itself and scurried away. The cubs watched it go, then looked back at her, their golden eyes bright with a new and profound understanding. The ritual was complete. Hannah sat back, her heart full. This was no longer just observation. This was a conversation, and it had only just begun. Hannah woke with a feeling of quiet excitement. The morning suns cast long, soft light through her small window. She thought about the beetle and the three cubs. She thought about their curious eyes watching her draw. It was the first real connection anyone had made with the native life here. The official reports called them simple animals. But Hannah knew better now. Animals did not bring you gifts to study. She went to the common area for breakfast. Her colleague Min was already there eating a food bar. "You look happy," Min said. "I had a good day yesterday," Hannah replied simply. She did not mention the cubs. Not yet. Her other colleague, Jean, walked in. He was looking at a data slate. "The sensor readings from the North Ridge are strange. A lot of small, quick movements. Probably just those big herbivores." "Probably," Hannah agreed. She finished her tea quickly. She was eager to get outside. She sat on the same sun-warmed steps as the day before. She held her data slate, but she did not read her book. Instead, she pulled up her drawing of the beetle. She wanted to be ready. She had a feeling they would come back. She did not have to wait long. A rustle in the ferns announced their arrival. Baran, Sora, and Nari emerged from the green shadows. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, watching her. They seemed more confident today. Their postures were less tense. Baran chittered softly. It was Sora who stepped forward this time. She moved with a delicate grace, her eyes fixed on Hannah. In her mouth, she carried something pale and shaped like a spiral. It was a seed pod, perfectly formed, bleached white by the sun. She placed it carefully on the permacrete in front of Hannah. Then she backed away to stand with her brothers. Hannah looked at the beautiful object. She gave the cubs a small smile. She pointed at the pod, then at her eyes just like before. She picked up her slate and began to sketch. She drew the gentle curves of the spiral. She made notes about its texture and size. The cubs watched, utterly silent and still. They were learning the rules of this new game. When she showed them the drawing, they chittered with excitement again. Sora seemed especially pleased, her tail giving a little flick. The day went on like this. It became a rhythm. After Sora's pod, it was Nari's turn. The smallest cub needed some encouragement from Baran, a soft nudge with his head. Finally, Nari crept forward. She dropped a single, long, blue feather on the ground. Then she scampered back so fast she almost tripped over her own 6 legs. Hannah studied the feather with the same seriousness she had given the beetle and the pod. She drew its fine details, the way the light caught its blue color. She showed the drawing to Nari specifically. The little cub's eyes went wide, and she let out a tiny, happy chirp. Baran, however, was the master hunter. His gifts were different. Later in the afternoon, he brought a piece of snakeskin, a translucent patterned sheath that had been shed by some large reptile. Another time, he brought a rock that was unusually smooth and hummed with a very low, soft energy. Hannah had to use her scanner on that one. The cubs watched the scanner with deep interest, their heads tilting at the soft beeping sounds. Then, one day, Baran brought something that changed everything. He came out of the forest alone. His walk was proud. In his mouth, he carried a small, furry animal. It was a ground rodent, a common creature on HFY. Hannah's heart sank a little. She did not want to see a dead animal. She did not want this to be about hunting. But as Baran dropped it gently on the ground, she saw it was still alive. The rodent was stunned, its sides moving fast with panic, but unharmed. Baran looked at her, then at the rodent, then back at her. His chitter was not a sound of offering food. It was the same curious sound he always made. He was not giving her prey. He was giving her a subject. He had brought her a living creature to study. Hannah understood. This was a big step. She had to be very careful. She moved slowly, making no sudden gestures. She pointed at the rodent, then at her eyes. She started her sketch. But the rodent, recovering from its shock, suddenly twitched. Baran was on it in an instant. Not to hurt it, but to control it. He placed a large, gentle paw on its back, holding it in place without causing any harm. He looked at Hannah as if to say, "There, you can continue." Hannah finished her drawing, her hands trembling slightly. This was more than curiosity. This was cooperation. When she was done, she looked at Baran and made a gentle shooing motion with her hand. Baran lifted his paw. The rodent, sensing its chance, shot away into the undergrowth. Baran watched it go, then looked back at Hannah and chittered, seeming very pleased with himself. That evening, Jean was waiting for her inside. He did not look happy. "Hannah, we need to talk," he said. His voice was stern. "The external cameras recorded your interactions today." Hannah said nothing. She just looked at him. "You are encouraging them," Jean said. "That was a live kith rodent. The male cub brought it to you. Do you understand how dangerous that is? They are learning that you are not a threat. They are learning to come close. That is the point, Jean. To learn about them. The point is to observe from a safe distance." Jean countered. "The report classified them as Class 2 predators for a reason. You are making yourself part of their environment. You are not a rock or a tree, Hannah. You are a living thing they are becoming familiar with. What happens when they are fully grown? What happens when they decide to test your strength?" "They are not testing my strength," Hannah said softly. "They are testing my mind." "That is a romantic and very dangerous idea," Jean said. He sighed. "I am the lead scientist here. I cannot allow you to put yourself and this mission at risk. I want you to stop this. No more sitting on the steps. No more accepting their gifts." Hannah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "Jean, you don't understand what is happening. They are communicating. They see me reading, and they are bringing me things from their world to understand. It's a form of dialogue. It is a form of habituation, and it ends with someone getting hurt," Jean said firmly. "That is my final word." The next morning, Hannah did not go to the steps. She stood at the main viewport, looking out at the clearing. Her data slate felt heavy in her hand. In the forest, The three cubs waited. They were excited. They had found new things to show the quiet human. Baran had found a crystal that sparkled in the light. Sora had found a leaf that changed color when you touched it. Nari had practiced being brave all night. But the human did not come. They waited through the morning. The steps remained empty. The quiet ritual was broken. Baran became restless. He chittered with frustration. Sora watched the empty door with sad eyes. Nari started to groom herself, a nervous habit. Finally, Baran could wait no longer. He trotted out into the clearing alone. He went right up to the steps where Hannah always sat. He placed the sparkling crystal on the cold permacrete. He looked up at the door and let out a loud, questioning chitter. There was no answer. Inside, Hannah watched him. Her heart ached. She saw the confusion on his young face. She saw him push the crystal forward with his nose, as if maybe she had not seen it. She made her decision. She turned and walked to the common area where Jean was working. "Jean," she said, her voice clear and calm. "I am going outside." Jean looked up, his face hardening. "Hannah, I gave you an order." "I know, and I am disobeying it." She held up her data slate. It showed the live feed from the camera. "Look at him. He is not a threat. He is confused. He is trying to communicate. If I break this trust now, we will never get it back. We will prove to them that we are unpredictable and unreliable. That is more dangerous than anything." Jean looked at the screen. He saw the large cub, pushing the crystal around on the step, looking again and again at the door. It did not look like a predator stalking prey. It looked like a child waiting for a teacher. That he let out a long, slow breath. "This is a massive risk." "It is a bigger risk to do nothing," Hannah said. "Please, Jean, trust me." Jean was silent for a long moment. He looked from Hannah's determined face to the screen showing the waiting cub. He finally nodded once very slowly. "Fine. But if there is even a hint of aggression, this stops. Forever. And you wear a comms link. At the first sign of trouble, I am coming out there." "Thank you," Hannah said. She walked to the door, her heart pounding. She took a deep breath and opened it. Baran jumped back, startled. Then he saw it was her. He chittered, a sound of pure relief. He nudged the crystal towards her. Hannah sat down on her usual step. She picked up the crystal. It was beautiful, catching the light. She pointed at it, then at her eyes. She picked up her slate and began to draw. From the viewport, Jean watched. He saw the other two cubs emerge from the forest and join their brother. He saw them sit in a quiet, attentive circle around Hannah as she worked. He saw the way they looked at her, not with the primal fear or aggression of a wild animal, but with a focused, intelligent curiosity. He leaned back from the window. Maybe the initial survey report was missing a very important page. Maybe Hannah was not just reading her books. Maybe she was learning to read an entire new world. And maybe, just maybe, that world was learning to read her back. The days settled into a new and wonderful rhythm. The clearing outside the outpost was no longer just a patch of ground between the forest and the human structure. It became a classroom, a laboratory, a place of quiet exchange. Every morning, Hannah would go to her spot on the steps. The three cubs were often already there, waiting. They no longer hid in the ferns. They would sit out in the open, their gifts laid out in front of them like students presenting their homework. The gifts became more and more thoughtful. It was no longer just shiny objects or interesting bugs. Sora brought a leaf that, when she licked it, made her chitter with a happy, dizzy sound. She offered it to Hannah. Hannah, of course, did not lick it, but she scanned the leaf and found it had mild psychoactive properties. She drew the leaf and made a note. Possible medicinal or recreational plant for Xylos. Nari, growing braver every day, brought a piece of dried, spongy fungus. When Hannah touched it, the fungus glowed with a soft blue light for a few seconds. Nari's eyes had sparkled with delight. Hannah sketched the fungus in both its dormant and glowing states. Baran continued to be the provider of more complex subjects. He brought a bird's nest, intricately woven from thorny vines. He brought the skull of a small animal, picked clean by insects. He seemed to understand that Hannah was interested in how things were put together, in their history and their structure. Hannah started to bring her own gifts. She showed them pictures on her data slate. She showed them a video of a fish swimming in an earth ocean. The cubs were mesmerized. They tried to paw at the swimming fish. She showed them a picture of a tree from Earth, with brown bark and green leaves. The cubs looked from the picture to the purple kaolin trees, chittering in confusion. One day, she showed them a picture of a domestic cat from Earth. The cubs froze. They looked at the small, four-legged, furry creature. They looked at each other. Baran let out a low, questioning growl. It was clear they saw a strange, deformed, and tiny version of themselves. Hannah quickly swiped to a picture of a sparrow, and they relaxed. She was building a shared language. It was not made of words, but of images and actions. Pointing at something meant, look. Placing something on the ground meant, this is for you. Showing a drawing meant, I understand. Her colleague, Jean, watched from the viewport. He had to admit, his fears seemed unfounded. The cubs were not aggressive. They were studious. He saw how they watched Hannah, their intelligent eyes following her every move. He started reviewing the old survey data. The report was brief. It described the Xylos as opportunistic hunters and largely instinct-driven. The report was wrong. He could see that now. The initial survey team only ever saw them from the air, Jean said to Min one evening. They never got close. They never tried to talk. Maybe talking looks different here, Min replied. Inside the outpost, Hannah began compiling a new report. It was not like the official logs. This one was full of drawings and observations. She started a list of sounds. Baran's chitter was different from Sora's. She noted their behaviors, how they groomed each other, how the two bigger cubs always protected little Nari. She was learning their culture. One afternoon, the cubs were late. This was unusual. Hannah felt a twinge of worry. She sat on the steps, her data slate unused in her lap. The forest was too quiet. Finally, they emerged. But their energy was all wrong. They did not bound out of the trees. They slunk. Their heads were low, and their ears were flat against their skulls. Baran was limping badly, favoring his front right leg. He was not carrying a gift. Hannah's heart jumped into her throat. She stayed very still. The cubs came to her and simply sat down. They did not look at her with excited expectation. They looked tired and sad. Baran lifted his injured leg, licking at a gash on his foreleg. It looked deep and painful. This was not a gift. This was a problem. They had come to her because they did not know what else to do. They had seen her fix things by studying them. Now, they needed her to fix this. Hannah knew this was the most important moment yet. Everything depended on what she did next. If she failed, their trust would be broken forever. She moved with slow, deliberate care. She pointed at Baran's leg, then at her own eyes. I see it. She then opened the small medkit she now always brought outside with her. The cubs tensed, watching the unfamiliar box. Hannah took out the antiseptic spray. She did not point it at Baran. Instead, she sprayed a tiny bit on her own arm. She showed them the wet spot on her skin. She let them smell the air. The scent was sharp and clean. Baran watched her, his golden eyes wide. He was in pain, but he was also curious. Next, she took out the dermal regenerator, a small wand that sealed cuts. She showed it to them. Then, she very gently pressed it against the back of her own hand. It made a soft humming sound and glowed with a blue light. She showed them her hand, perfectly fine. She was explaining the process. She was showing them the magic before she used it. She looked at Baran. He looked from the wand to her face. He seemed to understand. He slowly, hesitantly, stretched his injured leg out towards her. Hannah's hands were steady. She leaned forward, just a little. She did not make any sudden moves. She first used a clean cloth to wipe the dirt from the wound. Baran flinched but did not pull away. Then, she sprayed the antiseptic. He flinched again at the cold spray and the smell, but Sora, who was sitting right beside him, nuzzled his neck, making a soft, comforting sound. Finally, Hannah picked up the regenerator. She held it over the cut. She looked at Baran one more time. He gave a small, slow blink. Felt like permission. She activated the wand. It hummed and glowed, moving slowly over the gash. The cubs watched, utterly fascinated. The bleeding stopped. The raw edges of the skin seemed to pull themselves together. In less than a minute, all that was left was a thin, pink line of new skin. Hannah sat back. She put the tools away and closed the medkit. Baran stopped licking his leg. He bent his head and sniffed the spot where the deep cut had been. He flexed his leg. The pain was gone. He looked at Hannah. He let out a soft chitter, a sound she had never heard before. It was not a sound of curiosity or excitement. It was a sound of pure gratitude. He stood up and put a little weight on the leg. Then more. The leg held. He took a few steps. He was healed. The mood of the little group transformed instantly. The sadness and fear vanished, replaced by relief and wonder. Baran nuzzled Hannah's hand with his large, warm head. It was the first time one of them had willingly touched her. His fur was soft and thick. Sora and Nari came closer, chittering happily, their tails held high. They circled her, their previous caution completely gone. They had seen her power. She could take away pain. She could fix broken things. From the viewport, Jean watched the entire event. He saw the injury. He saw Hannah's careful, ritualistic use of the medkit. He saw the cub's reaction to being healed. He saw the nuzzle. He turned away from the window. He went to his terminal and opened the original planetary survey file. He found the section on the Xylos. He highlighted the phrase largely instinct-driven and deleted it. He typed a new sentence. Subject species demonstrates clear problem-solving skills, interspecies communication, and a capacity for trust. He saved the file. It was a small change, but it felt like the most important work he had done on this planet. That evening, Hannah did not work on her drawings. She just sat in her room, thinking about the feel of Baran's fur against her hand. It had been a soft touch, but its meaning was immense. They were no longer just observer and subject. They were friends. The next day, when Hannah went to the steps, the cubs were not there. But they had left a gift for her. It was not a seed pod or a crystal. It was a single, perfect, white flower from a plant she had never seen before. It smelled sweet and gentle. It was a thank you, and she understood it perfectly. The white flower was the start of a new season. After the healing of Baran's leg, the air itself in the clearing seemed to change. It was warmer, lighter. The last traces of caution were gone. The cubs no longer waited for Hannah to sit down. They would often be there when she opened the door, sitting patiently, their tails swishing gently on the ground. Their gifts became more personal. They brought her soft mosses to touch. They brought her sweet berries, which she would always scan and draw but never eat. They brought her smooth, round stones that felt good in the hand. They also began to show her things that were not objects. One day, Baran spent a full hour demonstrating a complicated hunting pounce for her. He would crouch, his 6 legs coiled like springs, and then launch himself at a leaf, catching it perfectly in his mouth. He looked at her after each pounce, as if waiting for a grade. Hannah would nod seriously and make a note on her slate. Hunting pounce, form excellent. Sora showed her how to find water by digging in a certain spot near a tree. Nari, one brave afternoon, rolled onto her back in front of Hannah, exposing her soft belly. It was a sign of ultimate trust. Hannah's heart swelled. She did not touch the cub, knowing it might be too much, but she smiled and gave a slow, approving blink. Nari understood and rolled back over, looking very pleased. They were sharing their world with her. Not just the things in it, but the knowledge of how to live in it. Inside the outpost, things were changing too. Jean had ordered a small, outdoor table to be built. It was placed near the steps. He said it was for Hannah to keep her equipment on, but they all knew it was a silent approval of her work. Min had started leaving out bowls of water for the cubs, though the cubs, proud and wild, preferred to drink from the forest streams. One evening, the 3 cubs arrived not with excitement, but with a quiet purpose. They did not have their usual gifts. Instead, they surrounded Hannah, chittering softly. They looked from her to the forest and back again. I think they want you to follow them. Jin's voice came through the small comms link in Hannah's ear. He was watching from the viewport. Be careful, Hannah. This is new. Hannah looked at the 3 young faces. She saw no threat in their eyes, only a deep, serious intent. I think it's okay, she said softly, more to herself than to Jean. She stood up. The cubs immediately moved towards the treeline. They did not run ahead. They walked slowly, looking back every few steps to make sure she was following. Baran led the way, with Sora and Nari walking on either side of Hannah, like a small, furry honor guard. They led her into the forest. The light changed from the bright suns of the clearing to a soft, green gloom. The air was cool and smelled of rich earth and growing things. Hannah had never been this far from the outpost on foot. The cubs knew the path perfectly, guiding her around thorny bushes and over slippery roots. They walked for about 10 minutes until they came to a small, hidden clearing. It was a beautiful place, dappled with sunlight. The ground was covered in soft, blue moss. In the center of the clearing was a large, flat rock, warmed by the sun. And on that rock sat an adult Xylos. Hannah stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. This was their mother. She knew it instantly. The female was enormous, much bigger than Hannah had imagined. Her fur was a darker, richer shade than the cubs, covered in a complex pattern of spots and stripes. A long, white scar ran across her muzzle, a history of battles won. Her eyes were the same gold as her children's, but they held a deep, ancient intelligence. This was San. The cubs ran to her, chittering rapidly, telling her everything. Baran stood tall, showing off his healed leg. Sora nuzzled her mother's side. Nari hid behind San's large front leg, peeking out at Hannah. San listened to her children. Then her powerful head turned. Her gaze settled on Hannah. Hannah felt the weight of that look. It was not the curious gaze of the cubs. It was an assessment, a judgment. This was the queen of this part of the forest, and Hannah was in her court. Hannah did not look away. She did not smile. She simply stood still, showing respect. She slowly lowered her head, just a little, in a gesture of non-threatening acknowledgement. San watched her for a long, tense moment. Then, she made a soft, rumbling sound in her chest. It was not a growl. It was a sound of consideration. Then, San moved. She turned her head and nuzzled something behind her. She gently pushed it forward. It was another cub. This one was smaller than Nari, and it looked sick. Its fur was dull and patchy. It shivered constantly, and its eyes were half closed. It was the runt of a newer litter, a little life that was struggling to hold on. San looked from her sick child to Hannah. Her message was clear and powerful. It was not spoken in words, but it was understood perfectly. You studied our world. You healed our hunter. Now study this. Help this. The trust the cubs had placed in her was now a demand from their mother. Hannah's quiet reading ritual had been elevated from a curious game to a vital skill. They saw her not as a strange creature, but as a healer, a shaman. Jean, Hannah whispered into her comms link, her voice tight with emotion. They've brought me to their den. The mother is here. She has a sick cub. She's asking me to help. There was a long silence from Jean. Then, his voice came back, quiet and full of awe. What are you going to do? My job, Hannah said. She moved forward slowly. The adult Xylos, San, did not move a muscle, but her eyes tracked Hannah's every step. Hannah knelt in the soft moss a few feet from the rock. She opened her medkit. She did not touch the cub yet. She first used her scanner from a distance. The device beeped softly, reading the cub's life signs. The data scrolled across her slate. The cub was weak. Its body was fighting a severe parasitic infection, something native to Kaler V that was sapping its strength. Hannah showed the slate to San. She pointed at the readout that showed the parasite, a blinking red symbol. This is the problem, she said softly, knowing the words meant nothing, but hoping her tone and focus would communicate. She prepared a hypospray with a broad-spectrum antiparasitic from the outpost supplies. She showed the spray to San, just as she had shown the medkit to Baran. She pointed it at her own arm and pretended to press the trigger. Then, she looked at San for permission. The great Xylos female looked at the small, shivering cub. She looked at the determined human. She gave a single, slow nod of her massive head. Hannah leaned forward. She was now within touching distance of the most powerful predator on this continent. She could feel the heat from San's body. She gently pressed the hypospray against the sick cub's neck. There was a soft hiss. The cub flinched, but its mother made a low, comforting rumble. Next, Hannah prepared a high-nutrient paste. She put a small amount on her finger and offered it to the cub. The little creature was too weak to eat, so Hannah showed San the paste. She mimed putting it in her own mouth, then pointed at the cub. She placed the tube of paste on the flat rock. San understood. She bent her head and gently licked the paste, then nuzzled her sick child, transferring the food and encouraging it to eat. The ritual was complete. Hannah had done all she could. She sat back on her heels, putting her tools away. She had not just healed a wound this time. She had been entrusted with the future of their family. She had been brought into their most sacred space and given their most vulnerable member to care for. San looked at Hannah for a long time. Then, she did something Hannah would never forget. She reached out her large, rough-padded head and very gently, very deliberately, bumped Hannah's forehead with her own. It was a brief, powerful touch, a gesture of profound thanks and acceptance. The walk back to the outpost was quiet. The cubs were subdued, sensing the importance of what had just happened. When Hannah emerged from the forest, Jean was waiting for her at the door, his face pale. "Are you all right?" he asked. Hannah just nodded. She walked past him into the outpost, her mind full of the green clearing, the sick cub, and the gentle, powerful touch of a mother's trust. She had gone into the forest as a visitor. She had come back as something else entirely. She had become part of the tribe. A week passed. The air in the clearing was filled with a tense kind of hope. The cubs came every day, but their play was quieter. They would often look back towards the forest, their ears twitching, waiting for a sign. Hannah waited with them. She had done all her science could do. Now it was up to nature. She continued her work. She drew the cubs as they slept in the sun. She recorded their different chitters and tried to match them to meanings. A high, short chirp from Nari meant she was happy. A low, rumbling purr from Baran meant he was content. A sharp, clicking sound from Sora was a warning to pay attention. One morning, the wait was over. The three cubs burst from the forest, their energy explosive. They bounded towards Hannah, chittering so fast and loud it was a single joyful noise. Behind them, walking with a calm and steady grace, was San. And trotting beside her, his legs still a little wobbly but his eyes bright, was the little sick cub. His fur was no longer dull. It was soft and fluffy. He was not shivering. He was curious, looking at the human and the big metal den with wide, wondering eyes. Baran ran up to Hannah and butted his head against her leg, then ran back to his little brother, as if to say, "See? I told you she did it." San led the small cub right up to Hannah. She nudged him forward. The little one looked up at the human. He sniffed the air. Then he took a few wobbly steps and rubbed his small, warm body against Hannah's knees. It was a thank you. It was an introduction. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. She slowly reached out her hand and let the cub sniff her fingers. He licked them with a tiny, rough tongue. She had not just saved a life. She had been given a new one to care for. From that day on, the little cub, who Hannah secretly named Kino, became a regular part of the group. The clearing was no longer a classroom. It was a home. The cubs would play fight around Hannah's feet while she worked. Kino, growing stronger every day, was the most mischievous, often trying to chew on the straps of her medkit. San began to visit regularly. She never brought gifts. Her presence was the gift. She would lie on the warm permacrete, a massive, peaceful guardian, watching her children interact with the human. Sometimes, she would watch Hannah's drawings with a deep, thoughtful look in her eyes. She was learning. 2.1 afternoon, Hannah decided to show them something new. She had finished her official work for the day. She called the cubs over. They gathered around, with San watching from a few meters away. Hannah pulled up a simple drawing program on her slate. She drew a rough picture of a xylos. It was just a circle for the head and a bigger circle for the body with 6 stick legs. The cubs chittered, recognizing themselves. Then, she drew a stick figure next to it. She pointed at the stick figure, then at herself. The cubs were silent. They looked from the simple drawing to Hannah. Baran reached out a paw and touched the screen where the stick figure was. He looked at Hannah, then back at the drawing. He let out a soft, understanding chitter. "This is you." Hannah then drew a line connecting the stick figure to the xylos drawing. She pointed at the line, then pointed from herself to Baran, to Sora, to Nari, to little Kino, and finally to San. She was showing them a connection, a bond. The cubs seemed to understand the concept instantly. They crowded closer, nuzzling her and the slate. San, from her spot, gave a low, warm rumble that vibrated through the ground. It was a sound of approval. They were not just human and xylos anymore. They were a group, a family of different shapes. This new understanding changed their interactions again. The cubs started trying to draw for her. They would use a stick to make marks in the dirt, looking at her for approval. They would arrange leaves and stones in patterns, presenting them to her like art. Hannah, in return, taught them simple games. She would hide a shiny stone and they would have to find it. She taught them to follow a pointing finger to a hidden treat. Their intelligence was breathtaking. They learned faster than any creature she had ever known. One evening, as the two suns dipped below the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Hannah sat with her back against the outpost wall. Baran was asleep with his head in her lap. Sora was carefully grooming Hannah's bootlaces. Nari and Kino were tumbling over each other in a playful fight. San was a warm, heavy presence lying beside her, her breathing slow and steady. Jean and Min came to the door to watch. They did not speak. They just looked at the scene. The human scientist, surrounded by the large, powerful predators, all of them peaceful and content. Min finally whispered, "The report was wrong, Jean." Jean nodded, his face soft in the evening light. It wasn't just wrong. It was blind. He looked at Hannah, who was gently stroking Baran's head. She didn't just befriend them. She found a way to talk to them. She found a common language. "What is it?" Min asked. "What's the language?" "It's not words," Jean said. "It's care. It's patience. It's the simple act of paying attention." Inside, Hannah felt a deep and quiet happiness. This was more than she had ever hoped for when she left Earth. She was not just studying alien life. She was living with it. She was part of its rhythm. The cubs had seen her reading, and in their curiosity, they had given her the greatest story she would ever know. The story of their lives, intertwined with her own. The stars began to come out, strange and beautiful constellations in the Kalan sky. No one moved. The human and the xylos sat together in the growing dark, a silent promise under the alien stars that they would face this world together. The hunt was over. The family had been found. The seasons turned on Kalervi. The purple leaves of the forest deepened to a rich, dark plum and then began to fall, carpeting the ground in a soft, rustling layer. The air grew cooler. The cubs were cubs no longer. Baran was now larger than his mother, San, a powerful hunter with a confident stride. Sora was sleek and observant, her eyes missing nothing. Even Nari and Kino had lost their baby fluff, becoming strong, graceful juveniles. Their daily meetings continued, but they had changed. It was less about gifts and more about shared time. The xylos would often arrive with fresh meat from a morning hunt, eating their meal peacefully in the clearing while Hannah sat nearby, reading or working on her ever-growing collection of drawings and notes. They were a pack, and she was part of it. One crisp morning, a new sound echoed through the valley, the deep, powerful thrum of engines. A new ship, much larger than the one that had brought Hannah's team, was descending towards the landing pad a few kilometers away. It was the resupply and personnel rotation vessel. The Xylos heard it too. Their heads shot up, ears swiveling. Baran let out a low growl, his body tensing. San got to her feet, moving to stand between her family and the source of the noise. The familiar peace of their clearing was shattered. Jean came out of the outpost, his face serious. The new team lead is arriving today, Hannah. A man named Park. He'll want a full briefing. He looked at the agitated Xylos. You should probably prepare them. Or prepare him. Hannah nodded, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Her world, the delicate understanding she had built, was about to be tested. Later that day, a group of new people arrived at the outpost. They wore crisp, new uniforms and carried themselves with the air of people who had just read the manual. At their front was Park, a man with a sharp gaze and a data slate already in his hand. Jean, Hannah, Park said, his tone all business. I've reviewed the initial data. I look forward to getting this outpost's operations up to full efficiency. His eyes then fell on the clearing. Baran and Sora were standing at the treeline, watching the newcomers with unmasked suspicion. Park's eyebrows rose. The local predators. The report stated they were reclusive. They seem very close. The initial report was incomplete, Hannah said, stepping forward. Her voice was calm but firm. They are not just predators. They are a sentient social species. We have established a communicative relationship with them. Park looked at her, then at the two large Xylos who were clearly guarding the approach to the outpost. He smiled a tight, dismissive smile. A communicative relationship? That's a very unscientific term. You've likely just habituated them to your presence. We'll need to implement proper deterrence to reestablish a safe boundary. That would be a mistake, Jean said, standing beside Hannah. A profound one. Hannah's work here is the most significant xenological discovery this mission has made. Her work, Park said, his eyes still on Baran, has created a safety hazard. I am reassigning Hannah to data analysis, effective immediately. There will be no more direct contact. Hannah felt the words like a physical blow. Before she could respond, a shadow fell over them. San had emerged from the forest. She walked slowly, majestically, to the center of the clearing. She ignored Park completely. She walked right up to Hannah and stopped. Then, the great Xylos female did something she had never done before. She lowered her head and gently, deliberately, placed her forehead against Hannah's. It was the same gesture she had used to thank Hannah for saving Kino. But now, in front of the new people, it was something more. It was a public declaration. A show of allegiance. Park and his team stared, their mouths slightly open. San then turned her head and looked directly at Park. Her golden eyes were not curious like her children's. They were ancient, intelligent, and held a clear, unmistakable warning. She took a single step towards him, and a low, deep growl rumbled from her chest. It was not a sound of blind animal aggression. It was a language all its own. Said, "This one is under our protection. You will not touch her." Baran and Sora echoed the growl from the treeline. A chorus of support. Park took an involuntary step back. The confidence drained from his face, replaced by a dawning, humbling understanding. He was not looking at dangerous animals. He was looking at a society. He was looking at a family defending one of its own. He looked from San's powerful, scarred face to Hannah's calm one. He saw the truth. The manual was useless here. The old report was a fairy tale. The real authority on this planet was not in his data slate. It was standing in front of him, covered in fur, its intelligence shining in its eyes. That he slowly lowered his slate. "I see," he said, his voice much quieter than before. Hannah reached out and rested a hand on San's shoulder. The growling stopped. The clearing was silent again. "Let me show you my reports," Hannah said to Park. "And then, if you're willing, I can introduce you properly." Park just nodded, unable to speak. That evening, the new team watched from the viewport as Hannah sat on the steps. The entire Xylos family was with her. Baran, Sora, Nari, Kino, and San. They were not bringing her gifts. They were not asking for anything. They were just there, a united front under the starlit sky. Jean stood next to Park. "The initial survey called them hunter cubs," he said quietly. Park watched the scene. He saw the way the large creatures sat with the human, the easy comfort between them. He saw the way the young ones leaned against her, and the way the matriarch watched over them all. "They're not hunter cubs, Jean," Park said, his voice full of a new respect. He was finally reading the situation correctly. "They're scholar cubs, and it seems we are the ones who have a great deal to learn."